Hi, welcome to another tutorial on interactive diagrams with Schemio. So in this tutorial we are going to look into the classes. And classes is a really cool concept in Schemio that lets you manage complex interactivity and then replicate it on different objects. And it's very difficult to explain to you right from the start, but let me first demonstrate you on an example of this diagram. So this is the diagram of the CDN, and as you can see the connectors are animated, but let me show you where I use the classes. So if I have the mouse on the edge servers or laptops or this origin server, you see that there's this label appears on top of it, and this behavior is exactly the same no matter which label it is, no matter which object. And the thing is, there's no native support for this in Schemio, so all of this I have built myself. But if we go into that diagram, we will see that the objects like edge server, the laptop, they don't have any other objects mounted into them. And these labels that are being shown on top, they're just some other objects. So how did I do it in this diagram? This is exactly where I use classes, because with classes I can create some complex interactions and then I can reproduce it in other objects by referring to the same class. Before diving in and then looking into how I implemented this, let me give you a quick tutorial and demonstrations on what the classes are. So first of all, let's create a simple class. Here we can create a class, give it a name, and let's just name it test class. First thing, you have this shape support that lets you specify which shape this class supports, and by default it's all shapes, or you can only isolate it to a particular shape. So for instance, a rectangular or ellipse, etc. Then we can go into the arguments. This lets us create class arguments, and it allows us to give us customizations to the class. So for instance, we can give it a name. By default, let's just give it John. Next, let's create a color. And another thing, let's make it size, number, and let's give it a default size of 3. How can we make use of these arguments? This is where we're going to jump into the next panel, events. And the events panel is exactly the same as if you would select an object. For instance, if I select this object and I go to the events table, I can create an event and I can define what's going to happen if I click the object, right? It's exactly the same in classes. It's basically the way it works is if I have an object and that object implements a class, it will just simply copy these events into its own events. And that's pretty much how the classes work. So let's create a simple event, click, and well, we can do anything, right? So we can create a blinking effect, etc. But let's make use of those arguments. So we will create a script, and in the script, let's say if we click it, we want to show the text, set text, and we will use the name argument. And that, as you can see, this variable was not defined here, and the thing is, since it's defined in the arguments, it will be in the scope of the script. Next thing, let's do stroke color, and we will use the color variable. And then let's update the stroke size, and we'll give it a size. So that's the third argument that we have in the class. Now let's create an object and give it a class. Select class, test class. Let's go into the view mode and see if it works. You see, we click it and then it shows the John, and so shows the John text, which was the name. So let's say we want to modify this behavior, so we can go here and then change it to Jack and change the color to green and then increase the size. There you go, it works. And the beauty of this approach is that we can copy this element multiple times, and then for each one we can configure different values. So this one is going to be John, color is going to be blue, and this one is going to be James, and get a purple color. Let's test it out. Click, and then this is how it works. So now let's delete this. Now you understand how classes work. Let's see how I managed to implement this functionality with the label on top. So every object, as you can see, has class. Actually, you can select multiple classes. In this case, there's a hoverable that changes the opacity. So if we go into the opacity, into the hoverable class, we defined the init event where we change the cursor to pointer, and then the mouse in and mouse out events that define the change of opacity. And for the tooltip over item that is also displayed here, I define the label source argument and a set of scripts. So what does the label source argument do actually, and why I did it like this? Well, the thing is, as you have seen, there are different labels appear on top of these objects, and that is exactly where I use that label source as to specify which label is supposed to be on top. So for instance, if I take a look at the Edge server, its label source is defined as Edge server label, which is this one. If I take the laptop, which is the user, it will use the user label, which is this one. And on initialization, I hide these labels because I don't want to just keep them around here. And in the class, if I go back to the tooltip over item class, I have 3 scripts. So initialization is where I get the label source. By the way, might look a bit weird to you, but if the argument is defined of the item type, it always returns you a list, because if you have tags, you can also specify them as part of the item, because you can, for instance, these ones, Edge server laptop, these is the tags, this is the tag, and then that tag is being used by multiple items. So it means that we can actually define multiple items using the item argument. And that's the reason why it's not just a single item, but it's always a list. But since we're only selecting a single item, it will be a list with only one element in it. So what I do here, I take the label source item, I duplicate it, and then I mount that item into the object. So as you have seen, those Edge servers, they did not have any child objects. But what happens when I go to view mode, it triggers the initialization event, the init event, and that actually runs the script for every object, because they implement this clause. They take that label source item, make a duplicate, attach to itself, and then they set a position. So they calculate the position to put it on top, right? Now, on the mouse in event, all we need to do is we need to find that object. And since we know its name, we can call this function called find child item by name. And all we need to do is we need to show it and then change the opacity to 100. That's it. And on the mouse out, we repeat the same thing, but now we just hide the tooltip. And that's pretty much it. So that's how it works. And this is just one example of using classes, but you can imagine you can do a lot of interesting things with it. So I think that's it for classes, and in next tutorial I will show you how to use functions for items. Thanks for watching.